Hello, good morning. My name is Jeff Metter. I'm here with the VR/AR Association, and I'm joined with the folks from Scope AR this morning. And first, I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. We're going to be starting this webinar in just a moment. Today, we're going to be talking about the key steps to driving ROI in your next AR project. I know that a lot of folks have been talking about augmented reality and how wonderful it is, how transformative it is within the enterprise environment. But today, we really want to dig into the return on investment. How are we measuring that value? And we're going to talk about that in a couple of different ways as it relates to augmented reality. We want to talk about some of the tangible things that we can measure in there, things like we're able to perform tasks faster, safer, with fewer errors. We also want to talk about some of the intangible bits that we've got in there, how it's affecting job satisfaction, and how it is affecting employee engagement, amongst other things. So those are some of the areas that we're going to be talking about today, and we're going to be diving into that topic in just a few moments here. As we begin, I do want to just introduce you to the VR/AR Association. We're the group that's helping put on this event. We are a global association. We are the largest professional organization in the world of folks who are working inside immersive reality. We really bring a lot of different companies together, people who are using the technology, people who are building the technology, people who are interested in the technology, and we really create an environment that really fosters that ecosystem, so that people can find partnerships, find out additional information, and find ways to really grow their businesses using this technology. They're really designed for people who are actively working in the technology, looking at implementing the technology, etc. A couple of notes about the VR/AR Association. I see that we're getting a lot of echo on the call. I'm going to switch audio device real quick. There, that should improve some of the sound quality there. Some of the things that to know about the VR/AR Association, we've got over 70 chapters all the way around the globe. So we've got things throughout the United States, throughout Asia, throughout Europe, etc. We focus a lot on industry committees, so we work in a lot of different verticals. We've got about 20 or 30 different industries that we really focus on, everything from aerospace to training to storytelling to, we have a new sports one that is launching either yesterday or today. So we're covering a wide gamut of areas in there. We've got a very large community that reaches over 25,000 people through all of our social networks and email lists, etc., focusing a lot on training, podcasts, webinars. One of our goals as an association is really to help build the ecosystem. We want to make sure that people have the tools that they need in order to make really strong business decisions about the technology. And finally, we do a lot of publications, some different events, and really try to partner with a lot of different conferences and different seminars, etc., to really provide a lot of discounts for folks who are trying to learn more information about the organization. Again, we've got 70 chapters across the globe. Here's a quick map of where you're going to see most of those. And some of the work that we do really focuses, like I said, really on building a lot of community guidelines, community best practices, so that people can really understand how the standards work within there. We try to be a communal resource for everybody so that people can turn to the VR/AR Association as a central point for finding out what's going on within the immersive technology landscape. One thing I want to point out is if you guys do have questions during this seminar, you are able to ask a question just by filling in the form there and clicking on the Submit a Question button. This recording This presentation is being recorded. The recording will be made available to everybody after the webinar ends. So if there's something that you missed, we are able to go back and pick it up from that recording if you guys have any questions. But also, please feel free to ask your questions in real time here. We will be saving most of the questions until the end, but do realize that we are getting your questions and we will answer those as soon as we can. And at this point, I would like to introduce David Nedwin from Scope AR. He is the Chief Customer Officer and one of the founders at Scope AR. And I'm going to turn the reins over to him and allow him to lead us through this discussion of how we're really building ROI using augmented reality. David, I'll turn this over to you.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction. I see that there's some echoing. I wasn't hearing that, so hopefully it's okay for everybody moving forward. Just a little bit of agenda. What we're going to go through is a little bit of an overview of Scope AR for those of you who aren't familiar with our company, give you a bit of background in terms of where we're focused, where we came from, sort of our experience in the industry, and why it's relevant to share that. I think that there's probably a wide range of, different levels of engagement and experience with AR. So we'll talk about some of the thoughts and feelings that, misconceptions that might be out there so that we can put it in context of how we move forward in a positive way. And then really where AR is playing a role in benefiting organizations, industry, workers themselves, and how organizations are actually utilizing augmented reality in the industrial space to improve efficiency and drive ROI. And really what we've learned in terms of working with these organizations in terms of the steps that are important to be successful through that. So I'll share some of those use cases, talk about sort of the learnings that we've had, and hopefully it gives you some good context to be able to take away from this in terms of how you would possibly start or continue building your augmented reality initiatives within your organizations. So a little bit of background on Scope AR. So we started in 2011. So we've been around really since kind of the early days of industrial augmented reality. I think we probably developed the first guided instructions using augmented reality, the first projects that were ever developed in that space, more as custom service projects. So this is an example of taken from a project, a water pump project that we did in 2012, just showing, you can see that animated head of the pump and, disassembling and taking it apart and basically replacing paper instructions. I mean, that was our focus. We did some really great projects for organizations that were quite innovative and looking at how AR was going to be used to support their work procedures. Companies like Boeing and Toyota and Philips at the time. And really what we realized was that this was going to be technology that was going to be extremely important to a lot of organizations moving forward, and it was going to be something that everybody was going to be engaged in. So we really moved towards, building products that would support the scale of that. Currently, we're a company of, I actually, it says 40 employees, but that was, as of current date, we're probably, I think, over 50 now. We are located started in Edmonton, Canada, offices in San Francisco, and we actually just opened operations in Europe as well. So we have a global presence, and we're really focused in industrial use cases. So we work in various industries, aerospace and defense, industrial equipment, manufacturing. Those are the areas that we're primarily focused in. And really what we're focused on is one thing, and that's making sure that workers have best practices, that they have the knowledge to complete their task correctly wherever they are, and that organizations can verify it's being done correctly and document that. And so we provide tools to do that in a couple different ways. Our WorkLink product allows organizations to connect their experts remotely to a worker who could be somewhere else and allow that expert to provide real-time guided instructions using augmented reality. So for those that might not know what that means entirely, just, kind of share screen, talk to the person, but then also add content, things like, annotations and arrows and 3D models, and actually even step-by-step instructions that show up in augmented reality right on the equipment to guide the worker in real time with an expert support, as well as software that allows organizations to build their own augmented reality work instructions extremely easily. So no coding, no programming required, kind of like PowerPoint for augmented reality. So somebody can just easily develop those types of work instructions without any real prior training to it. So again, all focused around just delivering best practices to the workers. Organizations have this knowledge. It's just a matter of making sure that they capture it and be able to make it accessible to the workers when and where they need it. And really, organizations that we work with use the technology in a number of different ways. Some of our customers are using it in the manufacturing space, either for assembly or maybe, quality assurance. So looking at, in this case on the left-hand side, sort of large equipment, but it can be small equipment too, just making sure things were assembled properly that are of high value, or that you go through quality assurance to make sure that they're, the process is being followed. In some organizations, it's being used for training, or making sure that procedures are being completed safely. That might mean training on equipment that is available. It might mean training on equipment that's not there. So placing potentially a holographic view of equipment in front of a worker and going through guided instructions, or connecting with an expert to show them what to do. And then, of course, I think the one that most people hear about the most is sort of that maintenance and field service. Workers being out on site and needing some help, and experts not always where and when they want to be. And instead of flying them out there, just making sure that they have those best practices. Interesting, in this slide, all the workers are using HoloLens, which is great. We're big fans, big supporters of it. But in a lot of cases, in fact, majority of cases, workers are using tablets and smartphones. Devices like wearables are still evolving, and in the right use case, they're extremely powerful. But still, majority of our customers are using devices that they're familiar with as well. We really do have a structure of an ecosystem, so everything is about sort of a knowledge platform for us. So not just delivering instructions. I think it's one thing to show somebody what to do, but the value of that is really generated when you can capture that process, that knowledge, the work that was done, and make it, repurpose it and make it available for workers down the road as well. So we really do have an ecosystem in terms of creating content, connecting to an expert, or doing both at the same time, and then having that session data, all the analytics, all the checklist items captured and stored into sort of a cloud or on-prem platform that then connects, with your own systems of record, to make sure that moving forward that those are available for workers down the road. So everything we do really is focused on a knowledge platform. So capturing and delivering that knowledge and building up a library and database of expertise that can be repurposed moving forward. And, we do try to make it as agnostic as possible, supporting in the bottom right there, you can see that there's, different types of operating systems, like I said, from wearables to handhelds. We just want to make it available on devices that people have and are practical based on the use case. We do believe it's really a focus of knowledge lifecycle. So unlike traditional forms of delivering knowledge, paper instructions or just verbal communication, that really is just kind of delivering it to the worker and then hoping it's applicable, hopefully it's current, hopefully it's best practices, and then hopefully the worker does it correctly. In this case, we're making sure the content is all current. So you can update, you can modify, publish, make sure workers have nothing but best practices, current versions. And then you can make them available to the workforce through whatever device they have. And that can be connecting to an expert or guided instructions or both, but then measuring, verifying the work was done correctly, making sure that you store that and tie it to the asset or the worker. And if need be, going back in and making changes to those instructions, making them available in a repurposed way or an updated version that the workers are going to have. So it really is kind of completing that circle of the life cycle of expertise. I think that in a lot of cases, when organizations are starting to work with augmented reality, there's a number of challenges that come up related to that. And in terms of assumptions that are being made, misconceptions that are being made, and some of those do come from the fact that technology needs to have a starting point, needs to have proper use cases, needs to really be aligned to a specific measurable action. But it's really important to address these, especially when you're starting out and looking at how is this going to impact not only my organization but the workers themselves, right? It's really common for organizations or workers, I guess, to worry about what does this mean for them. It wasn't long ago that I was in a manufacturing facility, and the goal was to improve efficiency on certain tasks by 30%. And the common feedback that was being provided to the organization was, well, what does this mean for me? Does this mean that 30% of us no longer have jobs? Does this mean that we're expected to do things 30% faster? And those are the types of conversations that are really important to address. In this case, the organization was struggling finding the best talent because there's just a lack of skilled labor that is shared between various factories. And what they wanted to do was attract the best workers, but also have a good work-life balance. So by being more efficient, maybe shutting down in the night times, or maybe not being 24/7. But it is a real concern. Honestly, media is not helping that, right? We're reading all sorts of stories about how jobs are disappearing and how that moving forward that, autonomous vehicles and artificial intelligence and robotics are going to replace workers. And obviously that's true. There's a transition that occurs in the workforce, and there has been for hundreds of years. It just means that we find new ways for the human workforce to interact with technologies that exist to become more efficient and find new opportunities to explore where workers can be effective. So some of the misconceptions that we kind of commonly hear is that robotics are going to replace the need for humans, or that older workers will either be left behind or their jobs won't be important. And these are important conversations, like I said, to have, because there are a lot of misconceptions aligned with that. Efficiency is what it's about. It's not about replacing workers. It's about augmenting workers to make them more skilled. There's a whole bunch of statistics that are available that show the reality of really what's happening, especially as we see the aging workforce getting to the point of seeing massive retirements. I know 10,000 workers retiring every day in the U.S. We're seeing here that the Deloitte article is saying between 2018 and 2028 that there's going to be 4.6 million jobs to fill in manufacturing. And this is important to be filled by skilled workers. They need workers who are going to adapt to the changing environment and technology. 71.3% of manufacturers are saying that they're finding it difficult to find skilled workers. And that really is, I think, the key concept in here, is that there's a skills gap that's occurring. Technology is changing. Workers aren't doing the same thing anymore, and digital is becoming part of the future of how we're actually going to engage in manufacturing, for example. So really looking at what is going to differentiate one organization or one workforce or one factory from the other is that skills gap. And in some ways, technology and digital technology is benefiting workers. In other ways, it's actually creating a skills gap. Workers who are engaged in using technologies like augmented reality are going to have the benefit of being able to do tasks that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. Workers that aren't engaged in that are going to be able to do the standard tasks that they were trained to do, which as technology changes, won't be enough to support the efficiency that an organization is looking for. So if organizations are looking to attract the best talent, they need to also engage in these types of technologies. 6 out of 10 manufacturing jobs are due to that skills shortage. So again, it's not about replacing workers. It really is about augmenting the workers, providing them with the ability to complete tasks they wouldn't otherwise be able to do if it wasn't being shown to them, and ensuring that you can measure that they're doing properly. So it really is about interacting with the other digital technologies, things like artificial intelligence and machine learning and robotics so that they can work together to be more efficient and more effective and be able to do things they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And there's certain things that humans are really good at, right? I mean, we're really good at being able to use gut feel and intuition and emotions. We work really well in a 3D space. So if we, put your hand on a motor and can feel that it's hotter than it's supposed to be, I mean, with IoT, that data is available anyways, but if it's got some sort of, noise to it that you can recognize from some other situation, combining that with things like artificial intelligence based on the IoT data that's coming out of that, and being able to intuitively show the worker that based on all this information, here's the best practices to be able to know what to do on that equipment at the right time, combined with that worker's experience, creates a very, a skilled worker that they wouldn't otherwise be able to have without technologies like augmented reality. But it's not just that, right? I mean, augmented reality is the ability to show the worker what to do. But those other tools, the other digital tools, are all part of that ecosystem that exists in terms of collecting data, measuring data, analyzing data, and providing best practices to the worker that are then displayed through something like augmented reality, and then capturing the process and the work that's being done and the analytics behind what that worker was able to do. So it really is a technology stack that combines a whole bunch of pieces to really deliver that ecosystem, really of just showing the worker best practices when and where they need it. Okay, so when we look at the reality of what something like augmented reality can do for a worker, older workers can stay in their jobs longer. They're provided the ability to see procedures, best practices that they might not have learned. I mean, the equipment they're working on changes so rapidly, it's important to ensure that they have best practices. And through augmented reality and showing that worker that type of information, they can actually stay in their job longer than they could otherwise. Workers are really re-engaged. If you look at the younger workforce and say that they could work for two different organizations, and one is using paper binders or videos, and the other one is using, hey, you can take your smartphone or your tablet, or we're starting to integrate wearables that's going to connect you with the most up-to-date best practices and show you what to do in a really engaging way. The younger workforce is looking for that. I know, if you have those two options, which organization that worker is going to select. And again, that skills gap becomes a major factor in which organizations are going to be successful moving forward and which are going to struggle to attract those best employees. And it really ties into job satisfaction. Everything right now is about enjoying what you do and making sure that you feel like you're contributing. I mean, it really doesn't matter whether it's aerospace or defense or industrial machinery, knowing that you're contributing to your organization in a positive way is extremely important for the workforce. And also, of course, this is where organizations are looking for the benefits is safety and efficiency, making sure that workers are completing procedures, maintenance, installation, whatever it might be, operation in a safe and effective manner. We've had so many times we worked with organizations that when we show the worker the best practices, they had no idea. Just for years, it was handed down from, train the trainer, this worker would show the next worker, and so on and so forth. And nobody was doing it correctly. But if you can ensure that they deliver the best practices every time, and you can measure that, they're going to be safe and efficient. The other side to it is that workers can honestly move into new roles. Maybe they don't want to be on the floor. Maybe they don't want to be underneath a vehicle or necessarily, working with a wrench on a piece of machinery, but they want to stay engaged. They know that they have a lot of knowledge and expertise that can be shared in a very beneficial way to their colleagues who are probably learning the ropes. So they can now either create content that can be delivered through work instructions, or they can work at their desk or potentially even at home as an expert who can provide remote support to workers. And instead of being one-to-one and flying, from location to location, they can now support many workers from that single location. So it's also creating new jobs, new roles where workers that are getting to that point of moving out of the field can stay engaged and organizations can benefit from their expertise and capture that, put it into a library, a database that's tied to that asset, and be able to repurpose it again. Again, going back to that knowledge platform. And workers are retrained. So instead of, equipment's changing all the time, there's no reason why workers can't simply see the new best practices based on the updated equipment, the changes to it, and make sure that they have the same skill level they did before. Okay, so obviously, this comes down to where organizations are seeing benefits. Obviously, from a workforce standpoint, there's a tremendous value. But when it comes down to the organizations themselves, how are organizations using it today? What journey did they go through to get to that point? And that's what I'm going to share next. So I'll go through a few different case studies, but the one kind of starting point to this is a good example of where industry is seeing augmented reality in terms of a now technology versus a future technology. It's not to say that augmented reality is meant for everybody in every solution, and that it's going to be perfect, using any type of hardware in any type of environment. But it is a mature technology that, with the right use case and the right application, that organizations are seeing tremendous value. So in 2018, Gartner's hype cycle curve showed that augmented reality was in the trough of disillusionment. So for those who are familiar with that, it gets, technology comes out and everyone gets really excited, and then it gets put into production and you kind of find the pitfalls before it climbs out of that and really becomes of value. In 2018, it was kind of in that bottom, that trough of disillusionment. Now, Gartner's saying that it's here. We're starting to see real value that's being generated from augmented reality, and organizations that are being strategic in terms of where it's being implemented are seeing tremendous success. So I'll go through a couple examples. The first one is with an organization called Prince Castle. Many of you probably don't necessarily know who they are, but we often engage with their equipment on a daily basis. So they're an industrial kitchen equipment manufacturer. This is an example of a piece of equipment. It's a bun toaster that McDonald's and Burger King uses on a daily basis. So that's why I say we may not know who they are, but we're very familiar with their equipment. So they have equipment that's all over the world. They need to make sure that equipment is up and running, and if they have any problems with it, that it's fixed very quickly, but most importantly, fixed properly. So they were struggling with a number of tickets being filed on the same issue with the same piece of equipment. So a contractor worker would go out to the site, do some analysis on the equipment, come up with what the problem is, do the fix, leave the store, and several days later they get the call back saying the same thing's happening. So what they realized was that it wasn't really about the skill of the technician. It was about actually properly diagnosing the issue. So they started using remote assistance through WorkLink to be able to connect with the technician, or in some cases, even with the store manager. Show me this, let me have a look at that, undo this bolt, pull this piece off, let me see what's going on. And they moved to 100% success rate in first-time diagnosis when doing that. Dramatically improving the efficiency and reduction in labor spend, but most importantly, having a happy customer. So having McDonald's or Burger King or so forth as a happy customer is extremely beneficial and extremely important for the organization. But obviously, along with that, significantly reducing their labor costs associated with doing those repairs because they had much less trips out to the equipment. Okay, another customer now moving along the food chain, so to speak, from bun toasters to CPG manufacturing. So Unilever is an organization that we probably, again, see on a daily basis one way or another. They do everything from, Dove skincare to ice cream. This is an ice cream factory, and they have quite a few ice cream factories. So similar problems, global workforce, workers that have different levels of training, and just trying to make sure that maintenance procedures are done the same every time, because when they're not done the same, they have unplanned downtime. And they've identified that 20% or 25% of repair issues are caused by the same issue, and that's an effect from unplanned downtime, meaning somebody not doing the work properly. Simple things like replacing a seal in a compressor that keeps it cool or cold. If that seal is not replaced correctly, its scheduled maintenance is accelerated significantly. All of a sudden it goes down, and they have significant loss. Combine that with the fact that in one factory in the next few years, they're losing 330 years of experience. That's a major issue, and they need to reduce unplanned downtime, which is a challenge considering the expertise that they're losing. They were able to do a 50% reduction in downtime or unplanned downtime by using guided work instructions as opposed to paper instructions. So simply showing the workers exactly what to do in a step-by-step process, not super complicated process, but oftentimes it doesn't need to be. Workers may assume that they know what to do, and they're forgetting something small or something that needs to be done. But by using augmented reality work instructions and maybe even connecting to an expert to verify it, they can make sure best practices are being followed and significant value is generated. So it's all about finding the right use case, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Unilever is an organization now that's gone through that initial stages of finding the right use cases. Again, not everything to everybody, but simply putting it in the hands of workers in a very defined, specific use case that says we can reduce the unplanned downtime of equipment and loss of ice cream or loss of revenue, or we can minimize the downtime of a manufacturing line by a certain percentage. So finding those specific use cases that they see are challenges and implementing it into scale and then moving it into additional factories. So very targeted, very focused, ensuring success through the right use cases. So moving along to a third customer that has some really tremendous stories. It's Lockheed Martin has been very successful due to their approach in terms of implementing augmented reality through our WorkLink product into the right use cases, and I've seen absolutely phenomenal results. They're very open about it and very public about it. So we've got some great stories. Showing you this picture just as a context from, the Prince Castle story where we saw a bun toaster to, the Orion shuttle that's going to be going to Mars. So very, very different organizations, but very similar problems. All the organizations, all three that I showed, are struggling with an aging workforce, technology becoming or equipment becoming more technical than ever, best practices being extremely important. So a few different use cases from Lockheed Martin. It's interesting that you can imagine they could find so many things to do in an organization of their size, but they were very targeted in finding use cases that were measurable, that were practical, that they could implement and show ROI in a specific time frame. Something as simple as drilling. We're really good at looking, people in general are really good at looking at a 3D space and understanding something. We're not as good at taking paper instructions and trying to translate those paper instructions and then looking into a 3D world and trying to imagine what that means on it. So through the use of augmented reality, and in this case, something like HoloLens, they can simply look at that equipment and know exactly where they're supposed to drill holes or where they're supposed to apply some type of fasteners I'll show in a moment. And they're seeing just ridiculous results on these. This is an example of a torque application where it's a heat shield on the Orion shuttle. I mean, it's extremely important that they have proper torque settings on all the different fasteners that are there. And not make a mistake. Obviously, they need to do the right ones. They need to make sure it's verified they've done it correctly by not having multiple people involved in this process. So again, instead of translating paper instructions and having somebody come and verify and eventually doing the work, they can simply look at the Orion shuttle, and fasteners that are one torque setting will show up in red. So they'll just set their torque wrench and go up and tighten them all. Fasteners that are another torque setting will show up in green. So they say next, shows all the green ones, and then say next, and it shows all the purple ones. So enormous improvements in efficiency. They're seeing upwards of 95% reduction in that time to information in order to do the work. So things like, in this case of speed, a 6-week activity completed in 2 weeks and a 50% reduction in labor. Another type of fastener, a click bond, just making sure that click bonds are placed in the right spot so that the harness fasteners are put in properly and that everything is aligned in the right spot. You can see that there's a lot of different locations on this, and they want to make sure that they're appropriately applying the fasteners to the right location. So in this case, a very large piece of equipment, they can use wearables like the HoloLens to overlay that to millimeter accuracy is what they were able to find. And they can make sure they can verify that a worker did something correctly. So there's no worries about did all the fasteners go in the right place. And when you look at the efficiency of this procedure, in the past, it would have taken 2 technicians 8 shifts to complete this. They're now able to do this with 1 technician in 2.5 hours. So I mean, just tremendous improvements. Their development costs, and that's the other side to it, right? I talked a little bit about the effort that goes into creating these types of instructions using our WorkLink authoring software. In this case, it took them 3 hours to develop this entire project. So you can see the math there, 93% reduction in touch labor, and it took them 3 hours to author the project. So just tremendous savings. And they see this over and over again. Another piece of equipment, this back shell panel, where they're attaching strain gauges and transducers. So very similar type of application. They found a use case that was successful and then start to expand from there. What they were really focused on, and same as Unilever and Prince Castle and all of our customers, is finding a use case that's applicable, that's measurable, and then growing from there, and not trying to do too much at once. Again, this used to take 1 tech, 1 entire shift. This now process takes 45 minutes. So tremendous value. Okay, and even looking around and trying to make sure that fasteners and cable harnesses are applied. I mean, when you look at something like the Orion shuttle, there's 60,000 fasteners that are installed, and if they're saving, I think it's estimated at $35 a fastener, well, you can do the math. I mean, the ROI for them is just massive on 1 single type of application. Now they're doing lots more, right? They're doing tons more at Lockheed Martin. These are the types of use cases that they're sharing in terms of the improvements. This one, 3 techs, 8 shifts, down to 3 techs, 6 hours. Okay, so Lockheed Martin is an example of a customer who has been strategic about deploying this, has understood the technology, has found the right use cases, and because of that, not only are they seeing internal ROI, but they're seeing tremendous value with their customers. So moving from the customer use cases in terms of who's actually doing this to what are the lessons that we learned as an organization in order to, help, I guess, craft that story, help organizations and our customers, our key stakeholders come up with a model that can be presented to executive, to management, to say, this is what we need to do in order to be successful. We're not needing to reinvent the wheel. We don't need to do everything all at once. What we need to do is understand how can we become successful in implementing augmented reality to drive an ROI that's going to be exciting for your organization. And there's certain learnings that we've had, and we continue to work with organizations right from the start to make sure that they go through these steps, okay? And really it is, I mean, the most important, well, I shouldn't say the most important, they're all important, because I think if you miss any of these, you're going to struggle. But it really does start with defining your use case. And I know I've said that a number of times, but it really has to start right here. What generally doesn't work really well is organizations that say, we want to try out this technology. We want to, take it for a test drive or tire kick a little bit, and then we'll find use cases that make sense based on our experience with it. Those usually kind of end up in sort of a pilot purgatory that doesn't have any real buy-in because the business units aren't engaged in solving a problem. So number one, is there a problem? Is there something that can be improved on in terms of reducing errors or improving efficiency or reducing downtime or reducing travel? Something has to be measurable, right? There needs to be a challenge that you're solving. So again, is it measurable? Time and safety, right? Do you have existing metrics? So just because it's measurable, do you have something that you're going to measure it against? Currently, it takes us, X number of hours to do this, or currently we have unplanned downtime of, X times in a month that we want to reduce to this. And is this a technology that can help us do that? Is it repeatable, or is it situation specific? So now that you've said, okay, we have a problem, we know what it is, we need to improve on this. What type of augmented reality makes sense? In some cases, it might be guided instructions, right? It might be something that's repeatable, so you can actually build using the WorkLink authoring platform to show somebody step by step, this is what we're going to do. Or in some cases, it might be, okay, what we're going to do, because it's very situation specific, something like Prince Castle, is we need to connect to a remote expert. But the important part of that is, okay, we've had 5 calls asking the same question. We need to build guided instructions so we don't have to have them call our experts every single time. They work hand in hand in terms of one driving the other. In some cases as well, it might be a different type of augmented reality, and I should mention that as well. Scope AR isn't everything to everybody either. If it's something like warehouse picking, I mean, that's not necessarily us. There's other organizations that are more focused in that side to it, right? So finding the right type of solution is extremely important. But then also understanding, what is the environment that you're trying to apply? So is it an environment that makes sense? What is it like in terms of safety requirements, dirt and brightness? Are you out in the sunlight? What types of hardware devices are going to work for that? So, you've said we have a problem. We know how to measure it. We know the type of augmented reality that we're going to apply. And yes, it's practical. So you've defined your use case, and you've got all the boxes checked that say this makes sense for us to start with. Okay. So now what do you do? Well, the next piece to that is talking a little bit about change management, right? So does the math work? I mean, it sounds like a simple enough question, but the question all the time comes back is, how much does this cost? Well, I mean, it's kind of relative, because if I said it costs $100, but you're saving only $25, well, that's not very good math. If I said it costs, $25,000, but you're saving $1 million, well, that's pretty good math. So you need to know what you're saving relative to what you're spending, and does the math really work on it? The second part is it scalable? Is there hardware that makes sense? Have you looked at how it's going to impact change management, meaning what does it mean for the workforce? And we were talking a little bit about this before. I think that story of that factory saying that, they want to improve efficiency by 30%. And for the worker, does this mean reduced jobs, or does this mean we're expected to do more? And the story really being about, no, we want to make sure that you have the skills to complete your job correctly. We want to make sure that you can be engaged in, functionalities or in maybe work that you weren't necessarily originally trained to do. We want to make sure that you have a great work-life balance. We want to make sure that you have holidays off. We want to provide tools that are engaging. All of these pieces are change management, but it has to start with, what does it mean for the workforce? What does it mean for the worker? Because that's got to be obviously where buy-in starts. Okay, then there needs to be the internal stakeholders, right? Nothing goes forward without having the right people at the table to help drive this, right? You need to make sure that you've got all the stakeholders to ensure accountability. We need to make sure that everyone's excited and that it's not just a shiny new object, but it's really planned to be successful. All too often, organizations will start with the new technology and everyone's excited, and then it really hits the ground, and you realize that there's work to do, and sometimes they fizzle off. So everyone's got to buy in terms of users and management and executive. You need to align with the executive team on what you're going to see in terms of benefit, and get everyone working towards, and that's the key word, working towards, a successful use case that you can show value from. Okay, so who are these? I mean, often you need to define exactly who these stakeholders are. And from our experience, every one of these needs to be at the table as early as possible. So IT and security, even procurement, I mean, they hate when you come up to them later on and say, we're going to be purchasing this, and then they start negotiating. Obviously, you need your workforce advocate. So the person that's, in that situation who really has the pain right now. What is it that you're trying to solve for them? How do they get excited about understanding what this technology can do for them and why it's important? Then, of course, you need your executive management support. You need not only to understand technology and say this is something that can help improve our organization, but you need a driving from top down in terms of showing that there's management that's saying this is important for us. We know that there's a digital revolution. We know that we're engaging in, anything from, cloud computing and machine learning and IoT, virtual reality, augmented reality. They need to be pushing this as something that's important. So those are the keys to, in terms of our experience, our learnings with our customers. That more or less concludes the presentation part of today's webinar. I do want to mention that we have an ebook, we have a number of ebooks that you can actually request from our website, but we have our most recent ebook, which is very relevant to this topic. It's a quick guide to AR ROI, and this will be sent out in a follow-up email to everybody that's registered in this webinar today. And with that, I believe we're moving on to questions.
David, thank you so much for all of that wonderful information. And if you guys have questions about anything that you saw here or anything that is related to that and how augmented reality can really be brought into your workplace, please feel free to go ahead and ask some of the questions using that ask a question box down at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get those here. We've already got a couple here. And David, if you don't mind, I'm going to just go ahead and jump in so that we can get as many questions answered as we can in this time. So I want to go back to the stuff that you were talking about with Lockheed Martin, and you had some really exciting numbers there saying, hey, it took them 4 hours of development time to create this, 3 hours, 5 hours. I've got two questions regarding that. One is, prior to that, what did it take them to get to that point? We're certainly picking out some of the great use cases there, but I imagine a lot of work went in prior to that in terms of working on other use cases and other projects that built the skills that they needed to be successful with these. And also, you were keying in on the development time. What were some of the other key tasks that they had to do prior to development in order to be successful with both their development and their implementation?
Yeah, good question. Really good question. We could probably do a whole session on that. But the one thing I will say about somebody like Lockheed Martin is that they're fortunate to have an augmented reality advocate within the organization that was targeted on finding very specific use cases that were going to be successful. So they didn't know exactly how, other than they knew that there was a problem in terms of a lot of time being taken to internally, so within a worker, translate paper instructions. And they actually call it time to information in what's called an OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. So they knew that there was a specific use case in terms of reducing that time to information that they felt they could improve by 30%. As it turned out, they were able to improve it by over 90% before the worker actually doing the work. But the key to that was that their AR advocate, actually the person that I work kind of very closely with there, Shelley Peterson, it wasn't a spray and pray approach like where you kind of shotgun and hopefully something's going to stick. It was understanding exactly the practicalities of the technology today, and that includes hardware, that includes computer vision, that includes the software, and saying of all the use cases we have, which ones align well to the current state of the technology, because we can always grow from there. And that is the key to it. When we talk about finding the right use cases, they had the other boxes checked, so the executive buy-in and the stakeholders and everything else, but they wanted to make sure they were very careful and pragmatic about finding the right use case. So that's really what we do in terms of working with customers now, is spending a lot of time with them off the start, from our creative services team to customer success, in helping the customer understand which use cases make sense, which are practical today, which ones might be more practical tomorrow. So often you'll sit in a room with 10 different people. You might have 10 different ideas of what they could solve. All make sense. Maybe 2 of them are something that they can actually engage in right now. And maybe 5 more is something that in 5 months as a new computer vision toolkit comes out or as a new hardware comes out, we can continue working towards those. So have a plan, but don't try and do everything at once. And so that's the key to seeing those types of numbers is working with an organization like us to, learn from our experience with customers and finding the right use cases. In terms of ramping them up and kind of getting them going, they also have mechanical engineers or they have engineers that are very familiar with 3D content. So it was a very quick ramp-up period for them to be able to actually build and deploy this. Not everybody has that, so maybe some organizations take a little bit more time. But within a week or two, anybody that starts with our software can actually be building their own instructions.
Great. So just to be clear on kind of the total length of time for a typical project in there, and I know that there is no typical project, and all projects are different. From conceptualization all the way through development and deployment, about how long would you say that's taking at projects similar to the ones at Lockheed?
Similar to the one that Lockheed had developed, I would say that they're probably 2 weeks of training before they can actually, on our software, before they would start building their own instructions. Their project might take, because they're quite complex, might take 3 to 4 weeks to build and then have it on the floor. As an average.
Okay.
So yeah, you're taking literally, in our experience, we had, for example, a number of projects that we built from scratch, using Unity and things like that, taking months of development work down to days or a week, for example.
Great. Now, as you're building these projects, one of the things that you get with augmented reality is you get these 3D images to appear within your actual space. Where are companies getting those 3D images from? Are they using existing 3D models, or are they getting them from some other place?
Great question. Combination of different sources. So majority of our customers have 3D CAD files already. So they're able to take those CAD files, and there's some conversion and optimization. I mean, we need to, prepare that content, which is typically a process that for each organization might be a little bit unique based on the types of formats and types of file formats they have. But our creative services team will help them kind of just define what that process looks like. I mean, it's pretty standard. There's lots of tools out there for doing that, so nothing that would be too abnormal for most organizations. But yeah, take their existing CAD models, do a little bit of optimization, conversion, and they can drag and drop it right into our software. Now, some organizations don't have CAD files. Maybe they're not the manufacturer of the equipment, but they're using the equipment. There's a number of ways to, and we actually have some documents on our website to talk about CAD-less augmented reality. And so the other ways of actually working in a work instruction, so 3D environment with that, would be, number one, you can scan. So there's a number of phones and devices that have the ability to scan and create a 3D model, which in some cases works fine. In other cases, we use what's called representative content. So, if you're taking a breaker out of a circuit box, instead of the CAD file of the breaker being perfect, you use a little rectangle, and that rectangle pops out, or you place an arrow showing something. We actually have some videos and some documents that actually focus specifically in on that question of what happens when you don't have CAD files. And that's okay. We can. There's a number of ways around that.
Great. I want to talk a little bit about the hardware as well. I know that you guys really provide a lot of the software and the AR technology behind that, but as far as the hardware goes, you guys deploy to a variety of different devices. You said that you've got a lot of people that are working on HoloLens, some people that are working on just smartphones, but we've also got the HoloLens 2 that's coming out. What are you seeing as the major differences that people are having using different devices, a smartphone versus a HoloLens 1 versus what's coming soon with the HoloLens 2, and what sort of recommendations do you have as far as the use of those devices, particularly as it pertains to what we've been discussing here?
Yeah, great question. So I would say that in terms of pure numbers, if I took all of our customers and all of their users and looked at the types of devices they're using, overwhelmingly, handheld devices will be much, much higher than wearables. And that's for a number of reasons. I mean, everybody has a handheld. Everybody knows how to use a handheld. From a technology standpoint, there's no learning on it. And they can be used in a lot of different environments. The other side to it is that the customers that are using wearables in the right use cases are seeing enormous value. So we're a huge fan of the HoloLens as an example, because when put in the right place for some manufacturing or, industrial equipment, as long as you have a user that understands that they need to go through some learning on how to use it, because it's a little different interface, the value that they're generating is massive. So pure volume, handhelds, overwhelmingly, but in terms of value, we're seeing things like wearables in the right use cases getting significant value. Now, we're a partner in terms of HoloLens 2 as well. We're very, very excited to see it out in the field. We're actually an approved reseller for it as well, so we've got a bunch of them that we'll be delivering to our customers. So my view on hardware is use a number of different devices. Understand how a handheld can be used, understand how a wearable can be used, understand different wearables. And from there, you can say, based on the use cases we have, here's the right hardware for that user, for that environment, for that use case, and here's the value we can expect from it.
Fantastic. David, I was hoping that you could talk a little bit more about the professional services that you guys do in relation to the people that are implementing this technology. How do you guys like to engage with people? What level of hand-holding do you have in there? How involved do you guys typically become in a project? And perhaps you can speak about projects that are for companies that are just getting started versus companies that have perhaps been using this technology for a while.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, we started as a service company, as I mentioned, and we have a creative services team that is very important to our customers. Customers kind of start working with us, and they have maybe a variety of different resources that are available to them. Some customers will come in and say, we have an author, we know who's going to do this, and here's our use cases, and they're really set to go. In which cases, our creative services team really just works with them as they kind of get ramped up on the WorkLink authoring software to make sure that they can help them with best practices and implementation, and here's what's coming down the road from technology and us, like really as a consultant. And that's extremely important. We're very hands-on in that stage. And that's all part of just licensing our software. We make sure that that's available. In other cases, we do have customers that will say, we know we need to start with this. We know we've identified our use cases, but we don't have a resource allocated to this yet, and we want to build a project. We want to get started. We want to start showing ROI as fast as possible. Can Scope AR Creative Services team help engage in doing that? And the answer is absolutely we can. If it's at that stage where they want us to start building projects for them, then certainly just for a service fee, we can do that. And our service fees are very reasonable because we get to use our own WorkLink software, which is, allows us to do it pretty quickly. In other cases, it's actually a middle ground to that. A customer might say that they're going to build a project, but we might actually engage in helping them do that, maybe build a version alongside them, because just no different than if you were using PowerPoint for the first time. Everybody could probably build a presentation within a day or two, but a PowerPoint expert is going to make it look very polished. So we might just help them along the way and do some tweaks or do some suggestions or show them some tricks to the trade to kind of ramp them up a little bit quicker. So varying degrees, we really work with the customer in understanding where they're at and what their needs are and how best we can support them.
Wonderful. David, thank you so much. We are getting towards the end of the hour here, and so I do want to bring this to a close, but I do want to make sure that everybody is aware. We've got a lot of contact information for David and Scope AR here on the screen right now. I would really encourage you to, if you have additional questions, and I apologize that we were not able to get to everybody's questions today, but if you do have some follow-up questions, you are welcome to reach out to Scope AR directly, and I'm sure that they would be happy to work with you and get any sort of questions answered that you may need. And a special thank you to David for presenting everything from Scope AR today, and thank you to the VR AR Association for hosting this. David, do you have any final words that you'd like to add in?
No, well, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting us to participate. The one thing that I would definitely encourage is that I think some organizations get sort of stalled by, paralysis by analysis and trying to understand how it's going to fit this massive long-term strategy and solve everything. It's ready. It's here. Start now. Find a use case. Go through the steps of really defining what's going to be successful, or work with us in helping you do that, or an AR provider. You can see benefit today. There's no question. So go through those steps and the learnings that we've had, and I'm sure you're going to be very successful.
And I think the steps that you provided in there are really helpful in doing that. And don't forget for everyone to look out for a copy of the ebook that's coming out as well. Yes?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks again, Jeff. I appreciate that.
Wonderful. Thank you all. If you have any questions at all, the way to get in contact with David is here on the screen. If you are interested in learning more about the VR AR Association, you can find us online at thevrara, just THEVRARA.com. Thank you all so much.